Okay, so now we're moving on to Agnaktor, who is currently our last 3U exclusive low rank monster. I hope to see it in a future game. I'd love to see it in Wilds, but currently it's only in 3U for low rank. It has returned once before in Generations Ultimate, but we're looking at equipment. So Agnaktor, the Fiery Leviathan. First off, armor. Pretty awesome and not quite what I was expecting. It's very stereotypical of what you would expect for like a Spartan kind of look for armor, with the helmet that has that special crest on it. Really neat use of reds and whites. I really love the look of this armor set. By far one of my favorites. It complements both in terms of having a unique design, also being pretty reminiscent of the monster, with how there's these accents of these red frills that are reminiscent of Agnaktor's own fins, and the helmet can even have like this beak-like effect, very similar to Agnaktor's own beak. So really solid set in terms of its aesthetic. Now, ability-wise, we have some really unique and honestly pretty neat skills. Guard is pretty good for if you're a shield user, reducing the amount of stamina that takes when you're blocking something. Of course, a fire attack boost is awesome if you're using elemental weapons. Sharpness is blissfully amazing because it halves the amount of durability to your weapon, like your weapon doesn't lose as much sharpness. And then we have an interesting one called Flame Aura that makes it seem like you're carrying a torch even if you aren't. I'm not certain as to what the effectiveness of this is, as I don't use torches in 3U, but I imagine it could be helpful against certain smaller monsters. Overall, a pretty complimentary set that I would still give an S rank. I like it quite a bit. Now, equipment-wise, this is where things get different. First up, we have the dual blades, which are probably the most simplistic of Agnaktor's weapons. They're both kind of fin-like. They look very much like as if you took two fins of Agnaktor's and tore them off, that still give off this flame aesthetic. They're pretty good, but not super amazing. I think there's an appeal to them, but they're the least favorite of the Agnaktor weapons for myself. Next, we have Longsword. So here's a bit more of a traditional single-edged longsword, but I think it looks really cool. The sheath in which the weapon rests in has this neat serpentine aesthetic to it. There's this neat like hole up towards the top, and the blade itself has a nice essence of being like that of Agnaktor's fins, a common motif for Agnaktor's weapons, as well as just having this nice curve to it and looking as if it's on fire. It's very pointy, sharp, vibrant colors. Fantastic weapon. Really like it a lot. Next, we have Gun Lance, which is a very, very unique one. The helmet, or not helmet, the shield looks very much like the top of an Agnaktor's head. It's both cute and effective, as it's not very intimidating, but I think it looks really neat and works very well for the weapon. Then the Gun Lance itself is more reminiscent of Agnaktor's tail, so it's kind of like a full body looking Agnaktor weapon here. I think that's really creative, and obviously Gun Lance using shots and having the Fire Wyvern Blast, these fire aesthetics that are already just kind of built in with the weapon just fit perfectly for a monster like that of Agnaktor, who's already shooting off all these laser beams. Really neat looking weapon, and probably one of my favorite Gun Lances. And lastly, I can at least show this in terms of the weapon craft itself. I do not have it as it's a high rank weapon only, but there is a lance for Agnaktor, which fits for the whole Agnaktor's armor set. This one has more of the tail look for its shield compared to Gun Lance, and the lance itself has, again, like Durambrus's own sword and shield, sword, this weird like double crescent or crescent-esque shape at the end of the blade, very much like that of Agnaktor's beak itself. This whole spiral effect that the weapon has is pretty awesome as well. Okay, so Overall, weapons, I give a pretty solid A. I like them a lot. They're really neat. Some are just okay, with that mostly being the insect or the dual blades. I think it does have an insect glaive. I just don't have it in Gen U. But they're still really awesome, and I think fit the monster very well, and just have some pretty good like fire damage, so they're neat. Lastly, much like with the Duramboros armor, I've had to kind of go check my Generations Ultimate file to get a good look of what the Palico set even is like. It's very reminiscent of that of the Hunter's armor itself. It also has the very Spartan-esque Trojan look to the armor, which is fantastic. I think it was very unique that they went with the lance in terms of the Palico's weapon. It looks a lot like the Agnaktor's lance itself, with that same head and beak aesthetic to the monster Agnaktor. The thing that's a little bit maybe more noticeable for me on the Palico set is that the lance itself even has like little jagged lines to represent the mouth, and it from a distance kind of looks like a folded in umbrella. I'd say it's a pretty good solid S. I still like it for being effective, because you already have a good armor set for the Hunter. Giving it to the Palico is just an additional plus. So there we go. Those are my opinions on the Agnaktor armor set. I might talk about some monsters next, but when it comes to equipment, we'll definitely be moving on over to 4th generation with Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, and taking a look at monsters that I haven't yet discussed there. So that's going to be quite a bit before we even move on to the 5th generation. And by then, 6th gen will have been started up, which will be fun to do a video of new equipment for returning monsters if we get any for that game. So look out for that in the distant future. Thank you guys very much. Happy hunting and take care.